The disappearance of Tara Lynn Grant in February 2007 shocked the quiet community of Macomb County, Michigan, and soon revealed a dark story of betrayal and murder. Tara, a successful businesswoman and mother of two, appeared to have a perfect life. But behind closed doors, growing tensions with her husband, Stephen Grant, led to a horrifying outcome. What began as a missing persons case quickly spiraled into a chilling tale of jealousy, rage, and deception. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered shocking secrets that shattered the illusion of the Grants' seemingly ordinary life. This is the story of Tara Grant, a reminder that even the most picture-perfect families can hide devastating truths.
Tara Lynn Grant was a 34-year-old successful professional and mother of two, living in Macomb County, Michigan, with her husband Stephen Grant. Tara often traveled for work, balancing her corporate life with family responsibilities. From the outside, the Grants appeared to lead a typical suburban life. However, cracks in their marriage began to show. Driven by Stephen's growing resentment toward Tara's demanding career and frequent business trips, he often felt overshadowed by her success and expressed frustration about being left at home to care for the children. On February 9, 2007, Tara returned home from a business trip to Puerto Rico. That evening, neighbors recalled seeing her arrive at the house. However, Stephen claimed that the following morning, after an argument about her work schedule, Tara left abruptly to catch a flight for another business trip. According to him, she left without even saying goodbye to the children. Stephen insisted that it was not unusual for Tara to leave for work unexpectedly, but those closest to her found it strange. As days passed with no word from Tara, suspicions grew. Despite her absence, Stephen waited until February 14th to report her missing. His explanation was vague. He believed she had extended her trip and hadn't found time to call. However, Tara's colleagues stated she had no plans for further travel and was expected to return home. Alarm bells began ringing among investigators and Tara's family, who were adamant she wouldn't simply vanish without contacting someone. Local authorities launched a formal search, circulating missing person flyers and appealing to the public for information. The Macomb County Sheriff's Department treated the case with increasing urgency as inconsistencies in Stephen's account emerged. Detectives noted that Tara's cell phone and credit cards showed no activity since the evening of February 9th. Stephen began making public pleas for Tara's return, appearing on news broadcasts and giving interviews. However, his demeanor raised eyebrows. He seemed oddly detached and emotionless. In several interviews, Stephen described his wife's disappearance with a disturbing lack of urgency. Some began to speculate whether he was hiding something. As the investigation continued, police scrutinized Stephen's timeline and movements. Stephen's story began to unravel by late February. Neighbors mentioned hearing loud arguments from the Grant household around the time Tara disappeared. Some also noticed Stephen acting nervously, avoiding eye contact and retreating into the house when questioned about Tara's whereabouts. Investigators found surveillance footage showing Stephen making multiple trips to hardware stores, purchasing tools and cleaning supplies in the days following her disappearance. The breakthrough in the case came on March 2, 2007. Police executed a search warrant at the Grant home, leading them to the garage. There, hidden behind storage bins, were bags containing dismembered human remains. DNA testing quickly confirmed the worst. Tara Grant's body had been found. The gruesome discovery painted a chilling picture of what had transpired. After the discovery, Stephen fled the scene, triggering a statewide manhunt. Authorities issued alerts across Michigan, warning that Stephen was dangerous and potentially suicidal. During his time on the run, Stephen left behind incriminating evidence. including notes suggesting he had planned to end his life. Stephen was eventually located 2 days later in Wilderness State Park in northern Michigan, suffering from severe hypothermia. It appeared he had attempted to take his own life but had failed. Paramedics transported him to the hospital, where he was stabilized and subsequently arrested. During his interrogation, Stephen confessed to the murder. He admitted that he and Tara had argued intensely the night she returned home. In a fit of rage, Stephen strangled Tara, killing her in their bedroom. Overwhelmed by fear and panic, Stephen dismembered her body with tools from his garage to conceal the crime. His goal was to gradually dispose of the remains. Prosecutors wasted no time in bringing charges. Stephen was indicted for second-degree murder, mutilation of a corpse, and obstruction of justice. The trial attracted national media attention, with every gruesome detail dissected in court. Prosecutors argued that Stephen's actions were premeditated, pointing to his purchases of cleaning supplies and his attempts to dispose of the body as evidence of a cover-up. The defense, however, painted a different picture. Stephen's lawyers portrayed him as a desperate man who acted impulsively in the heat of the moment. They claimed the murder wasn't planned, but rather the result of years of pent-up frustration and jealousy over Tara's career. Regardless, the overwhelming physical evidence left little doubt in the minds of the jury. In December 2007, Stephen Grant was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 80 years in prison. The court cited the brutality of his actions and his attempts to deceive investigators as aggravating factors. Stephen showed little remorse during the proceedings, further cementing the public's negative perception of him. Tara's family worked to preserve her memory, advocating for victims of domestic violence and raising awareness about the warning signs of abusive relationships. Her tragic death remains a stark reminder of the hidden dangers that can exist within even the most seemingly ordinary households. While justice was ultimately served, the case left lasting scars on the community and served as a cautionary tale about the devastating consequences of unchecked anger and resentment.
All right, so today we're going deep on the Tara Grant case.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've got some excerpts, from a longer piece that really kind of breaks down the whole story.
Okay.
It's pretty intense, and we're talking about Macomb County, Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Like suburban life, like pretty normal.
Yeah.
Tara and Stephen Grant, 2 kids, successful careers. The picture perfect.
Right.
But that's all about to change.
Yeah, it's always so strange, isn't it? How like these perfect pictures, they can hide these really dark things.
Yeah.
Like what starts out as just a missing person case, right?
Yeah.
It becomes something way worse.
So the source material, it paints this picture of Tara as like a total go-getter,
Right.
driven professional. Her work had her traveling all the time.
Yeah.
And seems like that caused some problems, some tension with her and Stephen.
Well, yeah, the source definitely mentions that Stephen, he felt resentful.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and like overshadowed by her success. And it wasn't just, a husband feeling a little left behind.
Right.
This was like deeper,
Yeah.
A need for control.
Yeah.
Feeling threatened by like her independence and everything.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how did the investigation start out?
Okay, so we know Tara got back from a work trip to Puerto Rico on February 9th, 2007.
Okay.
And neighbors saw her get home that night.
Uh-huh.
And that's the last time anyone saw her alive.
Wow.
But here's the crazy thing. Stephen, he doesn't report her missing until February 14th.
What?
5 days later.
Oh my gosh.
He says they argued and she took off, maybe for another business trip.
But that doesn't really make sense, does it?
No, not at all.
No.
Tara's colleagues, they said she had no trips planned.
Right.
And that delayed report,
Yeah.
that's a huge red flag.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Then you add in how Stephen's story kept changing.
Yeah.
And everyone was getting worried.
Oh, yeah.
Plus Tara's family and friends, they were like, no way she'd just disappear.
Right, especially with her kids.
Exactly.
Wow, so the Macomb County Sheriff's Department, they really got going then, right?
Oh, yeah. Full-on search, missing person flyers, asking the public for anything.
A whole worth.
A whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
But even as things ramped up,
Yeah.
something still felt off.
Really?
Stephen, he was doing interviews, begging for Tara to come home, but he was so strange about it.
Oh.
No emotion,
Like he was faking it.
Exactly. It was
Yeah.
creepy.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what he was really up to.
And that's when things start to fall apart for him.
Okay.
The investigators, they dig deeper, and neighbors start talking.
What'd they say?
They'd heard yelling coming from the Grant house around the time Tara disappeared.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So it wasn't all peaceful like he was saying.
Right. And then there's that security footage.
Oh, yeah. That's where it gets really juicy.
So what was on the footage?
They caught Stephen going to hardware stores like a bunch of times.
What was he buying?
Tools and cleaning supplies.
Oh, that's not good.
Not the best look, right?
Yeah, it's like he was getting ready for something.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it turns out he was.
Oh, no.
March 2nd. The police, they searched the Grant house. And what they find in the garage,
What?
well, it's nightmare stuff.
Oh, gosh. What was it?
Bags full of body parts.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so now it's not a missing person case anymore.
Yeah.
It's murder.
And Tara's right?
DNA confirmed it, yeah.
That's awful.
Horrible turn of events.
So what did Stephen do?
He took off.
Really?
Full-on manhunt, statewide, alerts the works.
Wow. So they were saying he was dangerous?
Yeah, and possibly suicidal.
And he left those notes too, right?
Yeah, basically confessing.
It's like he wanted to explain himself even while he was running.
Trying to control the story even then.
Crazy. And the notes said he was going to kill himself?
Yeah, but he didn't.
What happened?
They found him 2 days later in Wilderness State Park.
Was he okay?
Severe hypothermia. He tried to end it, but failed.
Wow.
So they arrested him, brought him in for questioning, and that's when he finally cracks.
He confessed.
He admits to strangling Tara during an argument.
Oh, my God.
He said it was a fit of rage, lost control.
And then he dismembered her body.
Yeah, and tried to hide it all out of fear, panic.
It's just horrifying.
Chilling confession, the brutality, the desperation, it's all right there.
So that's where we'll pick it up in part 2.
Yeah, we'll get into the trial and all the twists and turns of that.
This is heavy stuff.
It is, but it's important to understand,
Definitely.
We'll unpack it all, don't worry.
Okay.
We'll be back.
All right.
See you then. That trial, man. Stephen Grant's trial.
Oh, yeah.
It was everywhere,
I bet.
all over the news, every little detail.
Yeah, you can't really blame people for being fascinated by it. I mean,
No, not really.
it's one of those cases that sticks with you,
Uh-huh.
Makes you wonder, how well you can really know anyone.
Right.
So let's get into the trial itself.
Okay.
What were the prosecutors trying to prove?
They wanted first-degree murder.
Okay.
They were saying that Stephen planned it all out.
Mm-hmm.
Like they pointed to him buying those cleaning supplies and tools.
Right before Tara disappeared.
Exactly. And then how he tried to get rid of her body,
Yeah.
it all pointed to him trying to hide what he did.
So they thought it was intentional.
Totally.
Wow. But the defense, they had a different story, right?
Oh, yeah. Completely different.
What was their angle?
They said Stephen just snapped.
Snapped.
Yeah, like years of frustration.
Because of Tara's success.
Right. He was jealous, they said.
Huh.
Like he just couldn't take it anymore and lost it.
So they were saying it wasn't planned.
Exactly. A crime of passion, not some cold-blooded scheme.
So it was like two totally different versions of what happened.
Right. And it was up to the jury to decide which one they believed.
What did they end up deciding?
Guilty,
Wow.
but not first-degree murder.
What was it then?
Second degree.
Okay, so what's the difference?
Well, first degree means you planned it in advance.
Uh-huh.
Second degree is still intentional,
Okay.
but it's more like you did it in the heat of the moment.
Oh, I see.
So the jury, they thought Stephen meant to kill Tara.
But he didn't necessarily plan it out weeks before or anything.
Right. It was more impulsive, they figured.
So that probably made a difference with the sentencing, right?
Absolutely.
So what did Stephen get?
50 to 80 years in prison.
Wow.
The judge really came down hard on him,
Yeah, I bet.
especially because of how brutal it was and how you tried to cover it all up.
Right.
That made it way worse in the judge's eyes.
And didn't Stephen, not seem sorry at all?
Yeah, he never really showed much remorse during the trial.
Like he didn't understand what he'd done.
Yeah, it made people think he was cold, heartless.
That's so sad. I mean, for Tara's family,
Absolutely.
losing her like that and then to see him acting like that.
It's just awful.
So what happened to them after everything?
Well, they could have just shut down. retreated.
Yeah, I can't imagine what they went through.
But they decided to do something positive.
Oh, really? That's amazing.
Yeah, they became advocates for victims of domestic violence.
Oh, that's so powerful.
They wanted to make sure no one else had to suffer like they did.
So what kinds of things did they do?
A lot. Actually, they started a foundation in Tara's name to help victims.
That's great.
They gave speeches, talked about what happened.
And educate people.
Exactly. They wanted to raise awareness about the warning signs.
So important.
They even pushed for tougher laws to protect people.
Wow. So they really turned their grief into something good.
They did. It's really inspiring.
It is. It makes you think about how we as a society can learn from all this.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, how can we stop this from happening again?
It's a question we all need to ask ourselves.
It's hard to even imagine the ripple effect, from something like this.
Yeah.
Tara's kids, her family, everyone who knew her, their lives were changed forever.
Absolutely.
It's easy to get caught up in the investigation, the trial, all that. But the aftermath, the healing, that's a whole other thing.
That's where the real work begins.
Right. It reminds us that this isn't just about one person.
No, not at all.
Domestic violence, it affects everyone.
Families, communities, the whole fabric of society.
Exactly. And that's why it's so incredible what Tara's family did.
Yeah.
I mean, they could have just given up, retreated into their grief.
I can't even imagine.
But they didn't. They chose to fight back in a way.
To turn their pain into purpose.
Yeah. Can you talk a little more about that?
Sure, they did so much.
Okay.
They set up that foundation in Tara's name.
Right. To help other victims.
Exactly. They offered counseling, legal help, even places to stay.
Wow. That's amazing.
They also fought to change the laws,
To make things tougher on abusers.
Exactly. And they went out and spoke publicly, shared their story,
So brave.
trying to teach people about the warning signs.
Right. Because sometimes it's hard to see them.
Exactly. They wanted to prevent this from happening to anyone else.
It's inspiring.
They took something awful and made something good come from it.
They really did. So this whole deep dive,
Yeah.
it's been eye-opening, but also really disturbing.
Definitely.
Like, it makes you wonder how well you can ever truly know someone.
Yeah, and how quickly things can go bad.
Yeah.
Like everything seems fine and then
It's a reminder that domestic violence, it can happen to anyone.
absolutely no matter who you are, where you come from.
Right. And we talked about the societal pressures, like especially for men, that expectation to be strong and silent. Could that, sometimes lead to bottling things up, resentment, anger,
It's definitely possible, right?
and then eventually it explodes.
It's a pattern we see, sadly.
Yeah. We need to change that narrative.
We do.
Encourage people to be open about their feelings.
Seek help when they need it.
Exactly. It's okay to not be okay.
Right. And there are resources out there.
We need to make sure people know that.
Absolutely.
This case, it's a stark reminder that there are these hidden dangers.
Lurking beneath the surface.
But it's also a wake-up call,
A call to action.
We need to be more aware, more proactive,
and support each other.
to create a world where domestic violence isn't tolerated
Where victims are empowered.
and everyone feels safe.
That's the goal.
Well, this has been a powerful deep dive.
It has.
Thank you for sharing your insights.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, remember, if you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out for help.
You are not alone.
There are people who care and resources available.
Don't be afraid to ask.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Tara Grant case.
It's been a tough one.
It has, but an important one.
Absolutely.
Let's honor Tara's memory by working together to prevent future tragedies.
And build a world where everyone can thrive.
That's a world worth fighting for.
Agreed.
Until next time, take care.
Susan Powell seemed to have the life many dreamed of. Born on October 16, 1981 in Oregon, she grew up in a loving family surrounded by siblings who adored her. Her radiant smile and optimistic personality left a lasting impression on everyone she met.
Susan Powell seemed to have the life many dreamed of. Born on October 16, 1981 in Oregon, she grew up in a loving family, surrounded by siblings who adored her. Her radiant smile and optimistic personality left a lasting impression on everyone she met. In her early 20s, Susan met Josh Powell, a seemingly charming and ambitious young man. They quickly fell in love and their relationship blossomed, leading to their marriage in April 2001. The couple envisioned a bright future together, filled with love, laughter, and family. The Powells settled in West Valley City, Utah, and began building their life together. Susan worked as a cosmetologist and was known for her creative flair. Her clients adored her warm personality, while her friends admired her dedication to her family. Susan and Josh welcomed two sons, Charlie and Braden, into their lives. They were the center of Susan's world. She was a devoted mother, always ensuring her children were cared for and happy. Her social media posts often highlighted the joy she found in her family. However, behind the scenes, the cracks in their marriage began to show. Josh's controlling behavior and financial irresponsibility began to weigh heavily on Susan. He managed the household finances rigidly, limiting Susan's independence, and often pressured her to adhere to his strict ideals. Josh's relationship with his father, Stephen Powell, also raised red flags. Stephen's inappropriate behavior toward Susan, including obsessive advances, made her uncomfortable. Despite her concerns, Josh failed to address his father's behavior, further straining their marriage. Susan's friends and family grew increasingly concerned. She confided in her close friends about Josh's erratic actions and their strained relationship. She began documenting her struggles in a journal and creating a will, fearing for her safety and that of her children. On December 6, 2009, Susan attended church with her family. Everything seemed normal, and she appeared cheerful, as always. Later that evening, Susan prepared pancakes for dinner, a small act of love for her family. It would be the last time she was seen alive. The next day, Josh failed to show up for work. Concerned co-workers called the police, who discovered the family home empty but ominously disturbed. Susan's purse, phone, and keys were left behind. Her friends and family were immediately alarmed. Josh's explanation for her absence was peculiar. He claimed he had taken Charlie and Braden on a spontaneous midnight camping trip in freezing temperatures. Susan, he said, had stayed home. The story baffled investigators and deepened suspicions. As the search for Susan began, the community rallied together. Volunteers distributed flyers, organized searches, and prayed for her safe return. Yet, the shadow of doubt loomed large over Josh, whose behavior grew increasingly erratic in the weeks that followed. Investigators delved deeper into Josh Powell's life, uncovering troubling patterns. His finances were in disarray, his spending habits reckless, and his relationship with Susan marked by emotional abuse. Friends and family painted a picture of a man with a volatile temper. Susan's journal entries became a critical piece of evidence. They revealed her fears for her safety and concerns about Josh's controlling nature. She expressed love for her children, but voiced apprehension about the future if her marriage continued on its destructive path. As the investigation progressed, attention turned to Stephen Powell, Josh's father. During a search of Stephen's home, authorities uncovered thousands of explicit images and disturbing writings about Susan. Stephen's obsession had gone far, beyond what anyone imagined. Stephen's arrest brought temporary relief to those who loved Susan, but it did little to bring them closer to finding her. Meanwhile, Josh fought to maintain custody of his sons, despite mounting evidence of his instability. In 2011, Josh's behavior became increasingly alarming. He displayed no concern for Susan's well-being and refused to cooperate with law enforcement. He even moved to Washington State to live closer to his father, further isolating his children from Susan's family. The tragic climax came on February 5, 2012. During the supervised visit with his sons, Josh locked the social worker outside his home. Moments later, an explosion rocked the neighborhood. Josh had intentionally set the house on fire, killing himself and his two young sons. The nation mourned the loss of Charlie and Braden, innocent victims in a heartbreaking story. Their deaths intensified the demand for answers about Susan's fate, but the case remained unresolved, shrouded in mystery and heartbreak. To this day, Susan Powell's disappearance remains one of the most haunting unsolved cases in American history. Her family continues to advocate for her, keeping her memory alive and seeking justice for the young mother who deserved so much more. The legacy of Susan Powell is a reminder of the resilience of those left behind and the importance of shining a light on domestic abuse. Though her story is filled with tragedy, her family's unwavering commitment to finding the truth ensures she will never be forgotten.
Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to unpack a truly perplexing mystery, the disappearance of Susan Powell.
Oh, wow.
We've got excerpts from a text detailing her life and the events leading up to that December night in 2009 when she vanished.
Okay.
It's a case that draws you in because at first glance,
Yes.
Susan Powell was living the American dream. A loving family, a husband, two beautiful sons. But behind the facade, there were cracks, secrets, and a darkness that eventually consumed everything.
You know, what's interesting is that the more ordinary a life seems on the surface, the more jarring the contrast when something goes wrong. And in Susan's case, the source material really highlights how that normalcy makes the mystery even more gripping.
So let's start by painting a picture of Susan Powell. What kind of person was she, based on what we've learned?
Well, she was born and raised in Oregon,
Okay.
close to her family. Everyone describes her as incredibly warm, positive, and cheerful. The kind of person who lights up a room. She was devoted to her sons, Charlie and Braden, and had a successful career as a cosmetologist. Her clients loved her.
I was looking at some of her old social media posts while prepping for this, and it's heartbreaking. You know, she was always sharing pictures of her boys, talking about making them pancakes. It just makes her disappearance all the more unsettling.
Absolutely. It's that relatability that makes this case so haunting. You look at her life and think, that could be anyone. But then, of course, we have the marriage.
Right. Let's talk about Josh Powell. They had that whirlwind romance, got married quickly. Was there anything in the source material that hinted at trouble brewing beneath the surface early on?
Yes, definitely. Even in the early stages of the relationship, there were red flags regarding Josh's behavior.
Okay.
The source material points to his controlling tendencies, financial instability, and this pressure he seemed to exert on Susan to conform to his ideals. It seems he was very image conscious, and Susan was expected to fit into that picture-perfect mold.
And this is where we see Susan starting to express her fears right. She begins keeping a journal, even makes a will, which in hindsight is incredibly chilling.
That's right. Writing a will at such a young age is definitely unusual. It speaks volumes about the level of anxiety and concern she must have been feeling. It suggests that she sensed danger, and was trying to protect herself and her children.
Then we come to December 6th, 2009, the last day anyone saw Susan. It started like any other Sunday, right?
Yes, the family attended church together that morning. Later that day, she made pancakes for dinner, again emphasizing the normalcy of it all, and then she simply vanished.
And it's the next day when things really take a strange turn. Josh doesn't show up for work, the police are called to the house, and what do they find?
An empty house. Signs of a disturbance, yes, but no Susan. And perhaps the most baffling detail is that her purse, her cell phone, her keys, everything she would normally take with her was left behind.
Okay, so if I'm an investigator, that right there sends off 1,000 alarm bells, right? What did Josh have to say about all of this? What was his explanation?
His story was strange, to put it mildly. He claimed that he decided to take his sons on a spontaneous camping trip in the middle of the night in freezing temperatures, and that he left Susan at home sleeping.
I mean, that sounds far-fetched even without the context of everything else. Did investigators buy his story?
Not for a second. It was immediately met with skepticism, and suspicion naturally fell upon Josh. It just didn't add up, especially given what we now know about Susan's character, a loving mother who wouldn't just abandon her children.
Right, that's the part that gets me. It's like those little details about her personality, the pancakes, the social media posts, they build this image of a dedicated mother who lived for her kids.
Yeah.
And that makes Josh's story even harder to believe.
Right.
So where did the investigation go from there? What started to unravel as they dug deeper into Josh's life?
Well, several things. First, his financial situation was a disaster. He was deeply in debt with a history of reckless spending. Not exactly the portrait of a responsible family man. And then there were the accounts from friends and family, some of whom revealed disturbing instances of Josh's emotional abuse and volatile temper.
Oh, wow.
It painted a much darker picture of the marriage than what was initially presented.
And of course, we can't forget about Susan's journal, which provided a chilling firsthand account of her experiences.
Yes, her journal was a crucial piece of evidence. It gave voice to her fears, her concerns about Josh's controlling behavior, and the manipulation she was enduring. It's difficult to read those entries without feeling a deep sense of unease, knowing what ultimately transpired.
I can only imagine how unsettling it must have been for investigators to read those words, knowing Susan had vanished without a trace. It really adds another layer of complexity to this already perplexing case, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And as if Susan's situation wasn't complicated enough, there was another figure who entered the picture. Josh's father, Stephen Powell.
Right. This is where we see another layer of disturbing behavior come to light, isn't it?
Yes. Stephen Powell's behavior towards Susan was, to say the least, inappropriate.
Okay.
There were accounts of unwanted advances, an obsessive fixation, and the fact that Josh seemed to do little to address his father's behavior only fueled the suspicion surrounding him.
And then, of course, there's the discovery made during the search of Stephen Powell's home, which I imagine sent shockwaves through the investigation.
Absolutely. When investigators searched Stephen's home, they uncovered a vast collection of explicit images and writings about Susan.
What?
It became very clear that he had a deeply disturbing obsession with his daughter-in-law, which added a whole new dimension of creepiness to the case.
It's almost like a nightmare unfolding, isn't it? You have Susan's disappearance, Josh's questionable behavior, and now his father's disturbing obsession.
Right.
It's hard to fathom what must have been going through the minds of everyone involved. So what happened next? What was the next major development in this twisted saga?
Well, despite the mounting evidence and suspicion surrounding him, Josh fought fiercely for custody of his sons. He eventually moved with them to Washington State, effectively isolating them from Susan's family, who were desperate for answers. And it's there, tragically, that the story takes its most horrific turn.
You're talking about the events of February 2012, right? The fire, the deaths of Josh and the boys. It's hard to even process something that awful.
It's a truly devastating end to an already heartbreaking story. During a scheduled supervised visit with his sons, Josh locked the social worker out of the house, and moments later there was an explosion. He had intentionally set the house on fire, killing himself and his two young sons.
It's difficult to even grasp the level of despair that must have driven him to such an extreme act. And the thought of those two innocent boys caught in the middle of it all is just, there are no words.
It's a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of domestic violence and how quickly a situation can escalate into something truly horrific. And to add another layer of tragedy to this whole ordeal, Susan's body was never found.
So even in death, there's no closure, no definitive answer to the question of what happened to her. What does the source material say about the investigation following the fire? Did anything new come to light?
Despite extensive searches and continued efforts by law enforcement, Susan's disappearance remains an open investigation to this day. However, the fire did bring to light some previously unknown information. In the wreckage of Josh's house, investigators found a safe containing Susan's journals along with other personal items that she had kept hidden.
It's like she knew on some level that something was terribly wrong and was trying to leave a trail, a record of what was happening.
That's a very astute observation. The discovery of those hidden journals suggests that Susan was not only fearful for her safety, but also actively documenting her experiences, perhaps hoping that one day the truth would be revealed.
That's incredibly poignant, and I imagine it must have been both heartbreaking and validating for her family to have those journals, to finally hear her voice in her own words.
Absolutely. It gave them a deeper understanding of what Susan was going through and solidified their belief that Josh was responsible for her disappearance.
This case has so many layers, so many disturbing elements. It's hard to know where to even begin unpacking it all. But one thing that keeps coming to mind for me is the role of financial abuse in domestic violence situations. We talked about Josh's financial troubles, and I can't help but wonder if that played a part in his controlling behavior.
That's a great point. Financial abuse is often a less recognized form of domestic violence, but it can be incredibly powerful in controlling and manipulating a partner. By creating financial dependency, abusers can limit their victims' options and make it much harder for them to leave the relationship.
It's a reminder that domestic violence isn't always physical. It can be emotional, psychological, and, as you said, financial. And it can be incredibly insidious, wearing away at a person's self-worth and independence over time.
Exactly. And it's often difficult for victims to recognize those patterns of abuse, especially when it's subtle and gradual. It's a complex issue with far-reaching consequences, and I think Susan's case highlights just how important it is to understand the various forms that domestic violence can take.
I'm also thinking about the role of Stephen Powell, Josh's father, and his disturbing obsession with Susan. It adds a whole other layer of complexity to this case and raises questions about the family dynamics that might have contributed to the tragedy.
That's an aspect of the case that continues to intrigue and disturb people. Stephen Powell's obsession with Susan was clearly unhealthy and inappropriate, and the fact that it seems to have been known or at least suspected by other family members raises questions about why no one intervened.
It's like this whole case is a web of secrecy, manipulation, and ultimately tragedy. You have Susan trapped in a marriage that was becoming increasingly dangerous, her attempts to document her experiences and protect her children. Then you have Josh spiraling further into darkness, driven by his own demons and perhaps fueled by his father's disturbing influence. And in the end, 2 innocent lives are lost, and a family is left grappling with unimaginable grief and unanswered questions.
It's a heartbreaking story, and it's easy to get lost in the details of the investigation, the forensic evidence, the legal battles. But at its core, this is a story about human beings, their vulnerabilities, their complexities, their capacity for both love and darkness. And I think it's important to remember that even as we try to understand what went wrong and how such a tragedy could have unfolded.
You know, listening to you talk about this, it strikes me that one of the most haunting aspects of the Susan Powell case is that even though it's been years since those tragic events unfolded, there's still so much we don't know. Her body was never found, and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance remain shrouded in mystery.
You're right. And that lack of closure, that lingering uncertainty, must be incredibly difficult for her family and friends to bear. It's like a wound that can't fully heal, a constant reminder of the unanswered questions that continue to haunt them.
It makes you wonder about the psychological impact of living with that kind of ambiguity, that sense of unfinished business. It must be incredibly difficult to find peace or move forward when the truth remains elusive. You know, as we've been discussing this case, I can't help but think about the immense pressure Susan must have felt, the weight of her fierce responsibility of protecting her children, all while trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for their sake. It's a burden no one should have to bear.
Yeah, it's truly heartbreaking to consider what she endured in silence. And it underscores the insidious nature of domestic abuse, how it can thrive in secrecy and isolate victims from their support systems.
We talked earlier about her journals, those hidden glimpses into her reality. I'm curious, what specifically did those journal entries reveal? What kind of insights did they offer into Susan's state of mind?
Well, the journals painted a vivid picture of a woman living in fear. They documented Josh's controlling behavior, his emotional manipulation, and the constant anxiety she felt about her safety and the well-being of her children.
It's almost as if she was trying to document her own story, knowing that something might happen to her.
That's a chilling thought, but it's not uncommon in cases of domestic abuse. Victims often keep journals or diaries as a way of processing their experiences, documenting the abuse, and preserving a record of what's happening in case something happens to them.
It's both heartbreaking and empowering in a way. Heartbreaking because it shows the level of fear and desperation she must have felt, but empowering because it demonstrates her strength and her determination to leave a record of the truth.
Exactly. And those journals ultimately proved to be invaluable to the investigation, even though they didn't lead to the discovery of her body. They provided concrete evidence of the abuse she was suffering and helped to establish a timeline of events leading up to her disappearance.
It makes you wonder what would have happened if those journals hadn't been found. Would Josh have been able to maintain his facade of innocence? Would the truth about Susan's situation ever have come to light?
It's impossible to know for sure, but those journals undoubtedly played a crucial role in shaping the public perception of the case and in galvanizing support for Susan's family's pursuit of justice.
And speaking of Susan's family, I'm in awe of their strength and resilience throughout this whole ordeal. They've never given up hope, they've never stopped fighting for answers, and they've used their platform to advocate for other victims of domestic violence.
Their dedication is truly remarkable. They've channeled their grief and anger into something positive, creating a foundation in Susan's name to raise awareness about domestic abuse and to support other families going through similar situations.
It's a testament to the human spirit's ability to find meaning and purpose, even in the face of unimaginable tragedy.
It is. And it's a reminder that even though we can't change the past, we can learn from these experiences, honor the memories of those we've lost, and work towards creating a better future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the disappearance of Susan Powell, I want to leave our listeners with a few final thoughts. First and foremost, if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please know that you are not alone. There are resources available, people who care, and help is out there. Don't hesitate to reach out to break the silence and to seek support.
And remember, there's no shame in asking for help. It takes immense strength and courage to acknowledge a situation and to take steps towards safety and healing.
I think it's also important for all of us to be more aware of the signs of domestic abuse. Not just physical violence, but also the more subtle forms of emotional and psychological manipulation. By educating ourselves, we can better recognize these patterns and intervene when we see them happening.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the importance of listening to and believing survivors. Their stories matter, their voices deserve to be heard, and their experiences should never be dismissed or minimized.
We've talked a lot about the darkness in this case, but I think it's important to end on a note of hope. Even in the face of such tragedy, we can find inspiration in the resilience of the human spirit, in the unwavering love of Susan's family, and in their tireless efforts to bring about positive change.
You're right. The Susan Powell case is a stark reminder of the devastation that domestic violence can inflict, but it's also a testament to the power of hope, the importance of speaking truth to power, and the enduring strength of those who fight for justice.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the perplexing and heartbreaking disappearance of Susan Powell. We hope this conversation has sparked some important reflections and encouraged you to take action in your own communities to prevent violence, support survivors, and work towards a world where tragedies like this become a thing of the past.
And remember, even small acts of kindness and compassion can make a difference. Let's all strive to be more aware, more supportive, and more vocal in our efforts to create a safer and more just world for everyone.
On July 28, 2023, the peaceful community of Newfoundland and Labrador was shattered by a gruesome murder-suicide. Mehdi Pourbaghi, known for his crime podcast, The Last Witness, brutally dismembered his wife, Baran Abid, before ending his own life. Join us as we delve into the chilling details of this horrific crime and the investigation that followed. Stay tuned for an unforgettable journey into the dark depths of domestic violence and mental turmoil.
In a shocking and horrific murder-suicide, Mehdi Pourbaghi brutally killed his wife, Baran Abid, in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. Known for his crime podcast, The Last Witness, Pourbaghi dismembered his wife, Baran Abid, before ending his own life. Join us as we delve into the chilling details of this horrific crime and the investigation that followed. Stay tuned for an unforgettable journey into the dark depths of domestic violence and mental turmoil.
Mehdi Pourbaghi brutally killed his wife, Baran Abid, in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada.
This gruesome crime has left the community in deep shock and sorrow. Pourbaghi resided in Newfoundland and Labrador, having moved there for his Ph.D. in bioinformatics at Memorial University of Newfoundland. On July 28, 2023, the Royal Newfoundland Police discovered Barron's dismembered body in a suitcase in an empty lot in St. John's. The city, known for its reputable university, was left stunned. Pourbaghi and Barron had been married for 10 years. They appeared to be a loving couple, with Pourbaghi expressing deep affection for his wife in a Facebook post on their 10th anniversary. Barron, a hairdresser, had joined her husband in Canada 3 months before the incident. According to initial reports, Barron's life ended violently. Her body was found in a suitcase, and Pourbaghi was found dead shortly after, suspected of taking his own life. Surveillance footage of Pourbaghi carrying a suitcase was released by the police, who believe it was left in the lot between 1 and 3 p.m. on July 10th. Pourbaghi's podcast, The Last Witness, focused on true crime cases. Listeners noted eerie similarities between the last episode and Barron's murder. The episode described a bloody murder of a young woman, resonating disturbingly with the real-life crime. The community of Newfoundland and Labrador is in shock over this tragic incident. The police have not officially named the deceased, but confirmed their nationality. They are treating this as a targeted attack, but have not yet classified it as a murder-suicide.
Mehdi Pourbaghi was a 34-year-old deeply involved in his academic pursuits and his passion for storytelling through his podcast, The Last Witness. Born and raised in Iran, he showed academic excellence from a young age. He attended Allama Hali High School and later graduated from Sharif University of Technology. His LinkedIn profile reveals a connection with Tarbiyat Modares University, suggesting further studies or professional affiliations. Moving to Canada for educational purposes, Pourbaghi enrolled in a Ph.D. program in bioinformatics at Memorial University. His research combined biology, computer science, and information technology, fields he was passionate about. In addition to his academic endeavors, Pourbaghi created and narrated The Last Witness, a true crime podcast exploring real-life criminal cases. The podcast had a growing following, captivated by Pourbaghi's engaging storytelling. Each episode, released every Saturday, explored various criminal cases, emphasizing human elements and tragic outcomes. Barron Abid, 33, was known for her skills as a hairdresser. She had a vibrant personality and was loved by her clients and friends. Barron hailed from Lahijan, a city in northern Iran. Her move to Canada marked a new chapter as she reunited with her husband. Despite the challenges of adjusting to a new country, Barron was optimistic. She was eager to support her husband's academic and professional ambitions while exploring opportunities for herself. Her Instagram page showcased her hairstyling talent and love for life. The investigation into the murder-suicide of Mehdi Pourbaghi and Barron Abid was intense. The Royal Newfoundland Police found Barron's dismembered body in a suitcase on July 25, 2023, and later discovered Pourbaghi's body. Surveillance footage showed Pourbaghi carrying the suitcase, leading police to believe it was left between 1 and 3 p.m. on July 10. Police released the footage to gather more information from the public. They urge anyone with information or video footage from the specified areas to come forward. The investigation spans events from July 10 to July 16. The police treated the incident as a targeted attack. The community was in shock, struggling to comprehend the tragedy. The police continued to work diligently, piecing together the events leading up to the horrific crime. Darren's body was discovered in an empty lot in St. John's, a city known for its reputable university and vibrant student community. The gruesome nature of the crime left residents in deep sorrow and fear. The police aimed to provide clarity and justice for Barron's tragic end. In the aftermath of this horrific crime, the community came together to support the affected families. Memorial services for Barron Abid were planned, and counseling services were made available to friends, family, and residents struggling to cope with the news. Community leaders emphasize seeking help for mental health issues and recognizing signs of domestic violence. Local organizations stepped up efforts to raise awareness about domestic violence and provide resources. Educational programs were introduced to help individuals recognize and respond to early signs of abusive relationships. The push to prevent such a tragedy from happening again was strong. The horrific murder-suicide involving Mehdi Pourbaghi and Barnabid cast a shadow over the community. As the investigation continued, the community mourned, striving to find answers and support each other. This tragic event underscored the critical need for awareness, intervention, and support in addressing domestic violence and mental health issues.
کنترلم رو روی چیزی از دست میدادم که خیلی خشونت‌آمیزتر از اون بود که بشه برای همیشه در درون خودم نگهش دارم. نشسته بودم و یه سر بریده توی دستم بود. باهاش حرف میزدم، بهش نگاه میکردم. داشتم از هم میپاشیدم. میتونستم با این واقعیت زندگی کنم که همین الان یه زن جوون بیگناه و با ضربات چاقو کشتم و گلوشو بریدم. نه با اره، با یه چاقوی جیبی. پیچیدگی کار منو برانگیخته میکرد. روش موشکافانه‌ای که با اون مشکلات بالقوه رو حتی قبل از اینکه پیش بیان برطرف میکردم. قتل و مرگ همیشه برای من جذابیت داشت. مرگ ناگهانی و خون ریزی. نیویورک سرد و دلگیر بود، اما اشکالی نداشت چون با حس و حال خودم همخونی داشت. دنیا داشت تاریک میشد. میتونستم بیشتر و بیشتر احساسش کنم. تو گرگومیش نیویورک کنار دودکش میشستم و به این فکر میکردم که خودم رو از اون بالا پرت کنم پایین. یه نیرویی وجود داشت که آدما رو از من دور میکرد. یه نفر میخواست من نابود بشم. مرده ها حرف نمیزنن، اما قاتلاشون چرا؟